Hey, my name is Levi Bishop. I'm 33 years old, and I'm the third generation of my family to run the funeral home in Millbrook, a quiet town where I've buried more people than I've dated, which, until recently, was just about everyone I've ever met. I'll tell you how it started, because nobody believes it the first time. On our first date, she looked me in the eye across the dinner table and said, "Plainly, you're not my type," just like that. I thanked her for her honesty and made sure she got home safe. And 12 hours later, at 5 o'clock the next morning, my phone rang, and it was her, crying so hard I could barely make out the words. Let me back up. Bishop Memorial Home has been in my family for 60 years. My grandfather opened it, my father ran it, and I grew up in the apartment above it, falling asleep to the low sound of grieving strangers being treated gently in the rooms below. Most kids are raised around something ordinary, a farm, a store, a trade. I was raised around death. And the strange thing nobody believes is that it was the warmest house I can imagine, because the work my family does isn't about death at all. My father, Walter Bishop, taught me that when I was 12, the first time he let me help. A young mother had lost a baby. I was terrified. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to disappear. And my father put his hand on my shoulder in the hallway and said something I've built my whole life on. "Son, anybody can show up for the good days. Weddings, birthdays, the whole world turns out for those. Our family's work is to be the steady hands on the worst day of a stranger's life, to hold the door open for grief and never once flinch from it. That's the whole job. And it's the only job I've ever found worth having." Then he told me the other thing, the thing we still do, that I'll get to. He told me about the candle. In our home, from the moment a person comes into our care until the moment their family lays them to rest, there is a candle burning for them in the front room. One small flame, never allowed to go out, day and night. My grandfather started it. When I asked my father why, he said, "Because grief is heavy, and in those first days the family can't carry the light themselves. So we carry it for them. We keep it burning until they're strong enough to take it back." That's all we are, Levi. The people who keep the light until your people can. I loved that work. I still do. But I'll tell you the cost of it, because it matters to this story. People are grateful to a funeral director. They are not, as a rule, charmed by one. I spent my 20s watching every woman I ever liked find a polite reason to stop returning my calls once she learned what I did all day. It's just a little dark, Levi. I don't know how you do it. You're so sweet, but there was always a but. And so by 33, I'd quietly made my peace with the idea that I was the man people are thankful for and nobody falls for. The steady hands, never the heart. The one that stuck with me was a woman named Claire, in my late 20s. We'd dated 3 good months, the longest I'd ever managed, and I'd let myself hope. Then one night a call came in during dinner. A family 3 towns over needed me, and I apologized and went, the way I always have to. And when I came back 2 hours later, she was still sitting at the table, and she said, very quietly, "I can't do this, Levi. I can't build a life where death calls in the middle of dinner and you just go. Every single time you leave, I'll think about where you're going. I'll smell it on your coat. I'm sorry, it's not you. It's everything around you." And she left, and the worst part was that she wasn't wrong. That was the last time I let myself hope for a long while. Then my cousin Dean, who has never in his life respected my peace, set me up on a date. "Her name's Naomi," he said. "She just moved back to town to be near her grandmother. My wife works with her. She's sharp, she's gorgeous, and she has sworn off men, which is exactly why you two should meet. You're the least threatening man alive." "That's the kindest thing you've ever said to me," I told him. Just don't lead with the dead bodies, he said. Naomi met me at the one nice restaurant in Millbrook on a Thursday evening. And Dean was right, she was sharp, and she was gorgeous, dark-eyed and quick, the kind of woman who'd clearly been the most impressive person in every room she'd ever walked into. She was also, I could tell within 10 minutes, completely walled off. She'd come on this date the way you go to the dentist, because someone made you, and you intend to be out the door the second it's polite. We talked. It wasn't bad, exactly. She'd had a career in the city marketing, something fast and bright, and she'd left it to come home to Millbrook because her grandmother, Rose, who'd raised her, was getting on in years and living alone. She lit up when she talked about Rose. It was the only time the wall came down. She raised me, Naomi said. My parents were not built for it. Rose was. Every good thing in me she put there. She caught herself, surprised at saying so much, and rebuilt the wall a little. Anyway, that's why I'm back. Someone has to make sure she's not climbing ladders to clean her own gutters at 81. She's lucky to have you, I said. She'd say it's the other way around. She studied me for a second, like she was deciding whether I was worth a real question. What about you? You grew up here? Above the shop, I said. Same building my whole life. I'm not a complicated story, Naomi. I'm a small-town man who does a quiet job and likes it. No grand adventure. That's almost suspicious, she said. Everyone has a grand adventure they're chasing. Maybe I already found the thing I'd have gone chasing, I said. Some people have to travel the world to learn what matters. I had the luck, or the bad luck, of learning it early, right here. Turns out it doesn't take much square footage. She didn't have an answer for that, and for a moment something almost opened in her face. Then the waiter came, and the moment passed, and she steered us back to safer ground. And what do you do? She finally asked, the way you ask a question you've already half decided not to care about the answer to. I run the funeral home, I said. I never dress it up. Bishop Memorial. My family's place. Something flickered across her face, that flicker I'd seen 100 times. Oh, she said. Wow, that's heavy. It can be. Doesn't it depress you, being around death all the time? It's not really about death, I started to say, the way my father had taught me. It's about, but she'd already decided. I watched her decide. She set down her fork, and she gave me a look that wasn't cruel, just honest, brutally, tiredly honest. The honesty of a woman who has wasted too much of her life being polite to men. Levi, you seem like a genuinely nice person, she said. So I'm going to be straight with you, because I think you'd want me to be. You're not my type. You're just not. I've spent a lot of years with intense, exciting, complicated men, and it nearly wrecked me, and I'm done. And you're lovely, and you're calm, and you run a funeral home, and there's just no spark here for me. I'm sorry. I'd rather tell you the truth than waste your evening. And here's the thing I did, that I didn't understand the importance of until the next morning. I didn't argue. I didn't get defensive. Didn't try to convince her she was wrong. Didn't sulk. I just nodded. I appreciate that, I said, and I meant it. Truly, you'd be amazed how rare it is for someone to just tell me the truth. Most people make up an excuse. I smiled. For what it's worth, you're allowed to know exactly what you want. That's not a flaw. She blinked, like that wasn't the reaction she'd braced for. We finished dinner anyway, easier, somehow, once the pressure was gone. I paid, and when we got to the parking lot, and I saw her shiver in the cold, I walked her to her car and waited, the way my father always waited, until I heard the engine turn over and saw her headlights come on. Because you never leave someone alone in the dark until you know they're safely on their way. It's just a habit. The whole family has it. We walk everyone to their car. You don't have to do that, she said through the window. I know, I said. Good night, Naomi. I hope you find your spark. I drove home, fed the candle in the front room. We had an elderly gentleman in our care that week, and went to bed thinking, well, at least she was honest, and figuring I'd never see Naomi again. At 5:04 the next morning, my phone rang. I answered the way I always do at that hour, because at that hour the calls are never good. Bishop Memorial, this is Levi. For a second there was just ragged breathing. Then, Levi, it's Naomi. From last night. I'm so sorry to call you. I know how this looks. I know what I said, but you're the only person I have whose number she broke. It's my grandmother. It's Rose. I came over this morning to make her breakfast and she's gone. Levi, she died in her sleep. And I'm standing in her kitchen and I don't know what to do. I don't know who to call. I've never Please, I don't know how to do this. I was already pulling on my clothes. Naomi, listen to my voice. I'm coming right now. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to know how. That's what I'm for. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Are you somewhere you can sit down? Yes, the kitchen chair. Sit down. Put your hand flat on the table so you can feel something solid. I'm on my way. You are not alone. Do you hear me? You are not alone. I have driven to 1,000 worse days, but I have never driven faster than I drove to Rose's house that morning. What happened over the next few hours, I won't dress up, because the truth of it is the whole point. I did my job, the job my father taught me. I came in quietly, and I knelt down in front of Naomi where she sat shaking in that kitchen chair. And the first thing I did wasn't paperwork or logistics. It was to take both her cold hands in mine and say, I'm so sorry. Tell me about her. Tell me about Rose. Because the dead deserve to be spoken of as people, and the living need to remember, even in shock, that the person they lost was loved. And Naomi, through her tears, told me about the grandmother who'd raised her when her own parents couldn't, about Sunday pancakes and 100 small kindnesses, and the woman who'd been her whole foundation. I listened to all of it, the way my father taught me to listen, and only when she'd slowed down did I gently begin to carry the things she couldn't. I treated Rose with every ounce of tenderness in me. When the time came to take her into our care, I told Naomi exactly what would happen, step by step, no surprises, and I let her say her goodbye, and I made sure her grandmother left that house with the dignity of a queen. Naomi watched me do all of it. She watched the man she'd called not my type 12 hours earlier handle the worst morning of her life with steady hands that never once flinched. Then, I took her back to Bishop Memorial, sat her in my office with a cup of tea, and that's where the first thing happened that I could never have planned. I pulled Rose's name to begin the arrangements, and our system flagged a file, an old one. I opened it, and I went still. Naomi, I said carefully, did your grandmother ever tell you she'd pre-arranged her funeral? What? No, she never. What do you mean? She came here 11 years ago, I said, reading my father's handwriting on the intake. She sat down with my father, and she planned the whole thing. Every detail. Paid in full. The hymns, the readings, the casket. She didn't want you to have to make a single decision in your grief. My throat tightened. There's a note here. She left something. For you. My father sealed it. We were instructed to give it to you on this day, and only this day. Naomi's hand flew to her mouth. I gave her the envelope, and I stepped out to let her read it alone, the way you do. I never saw what Rose wrote to her granddaughter. That was theirs. But I heard Naomi crying through the door, a different crying than before. The kind that has love folded into the grief, and when she finally came out, 20 minutes later, she was holding the letter against her chest like something alive, and she looked at me with an expression I'd never had pointed at me in my life. She knew, Naomi said. 11 years ago. She knew she'd go someday, and she didn't want me to suffer one extra ounce. She planned the whole thing so all I'd have to do was grieve. She wiped her face. And she wrote that she'd be carried by good hands. That she'd chosen your family on purpose, years ago, because your father walked her to her car in the rain after she came in to plan it, and she said any family that does that walks an old woman to her car in the rain, is a family that knows what people are worth. Naomi laughed and sobbed at once. She picked you. She picked your family to carry her, before I ever sat across that table and told you there was no spark. I didn't know what to say. So I told her the truth. We keep a candle burning, I said. From now until the service. One flame, never out, day and night. My grandfather started it. We do it because grief is too heavy to carry the light yourself in the first days. So we keep it for you, until you're strong enough to take it back. I looked at her. Rose's candle is lit, Naomi. It's been burning since this morning. I'll keep it for as long as you need. She came back to Bishop Memorial every single day that week. She told herself, and me, that it was to finalize details, but the details were already done. Rose had seen to that 11 years before. The truth was that the funeral home, the quiet front room with the single flame, had become the only place Naomi could breathe. She'd sit in the chair by the candle for hours. And I'd work nearby, and sometimes we'd talk, and sometimes we wouldn't. And slowly, over a week of the worst days of her life, the wall I'd watched her hide behind at dinner came down brick by brick, because grief doesn't leave you the strength to hold walls up. One afternoon that week, while Naomi sat by the candle, another family came in. A young couple, devastated they'd lost their little boy, just 4 years old, to an illness that had moved too fast for anyone to stop. I didn't know Naomi was watching. I went to them the way my father taught me, knelt down to the mother's level, took the photograph she was clutching, and asked his name, and asked her to tell me about him. And this shattered young mother started to talk about her son. And somewhere in the talking she did the thing grief sometimes lets you do. She laughed. Just once, remembering something he'd said. A small, bright laugh in the middle of the worst day of her life. And I held that laugh with her like it was made of glass. When they left, Naomi was standing in the doorway of my office with the strangest look on her face. "You did the same thing for me," she said quietly. "The first thing you did, in Rose's kitchen, you didn't ask about paperwork. You asked me to tell you about her. You got me to laugh even then. I didn't notice you doing it. I just noticed I could breathe again." She wiped her eyes. "I told you there was no spark. I think I didn't know what I was looking at. I'd never seen a man whose whole life was being gentle to people who could never pay him back for it. I didn't have a category for it. So I called it boring." She shook her head. "God, I'm an idiot." "You're not an idiot," I said. "You're a woman who got taught by hard men that gentleness is weakness. It isn't. It's just the hardest thing there is to do every single day." I learned who she actually was that week. Not the polished, armored woman from the restaurant that was the version she'd built to survive the city, the intense men, the years of being impressive and unhappy. The real Naomi was funny in a dry, exhausted way, and ferociously loyal, and so tender underneath the armor that she'd had to build the armor just to function. The "you're not my type" had never been about me at all. It had been a woman so afraid of being hurt again that she'd decided to call anything calm and safe boring. Because boring couldn't break her heart. We buried Rose on a bright cold Saturday. The whole town came, everyone had loved her. The hymns were the ones she'd chosen herself, 11 years before, and I watched Naomi sing them with tears streaming down her face, and at the end of the service I did the last thing my father taught me. I brought her the candle. "It's yours now," I said quietly, pressing the small flame into her hands. "You're strong enough to carry it. You have been all week, even when you didn't believe it. I was just holding it until you were ready." She took the candle, and she looked up at me, and something passed between us that neither of us said out loud, because it wasn't the time. But we both felt it. Here is where I almost ruined everything, and where she nearly did too. In the weeks after the funeral, Naomi kept coming around. Coffee, a walk, dropping off a pie to say thank you. And I felt it growing in me. This thing I'd given up on ever feeling, but I also felt the old fear, sharper than ever. And one evening on my porch, I made myself say it. Because my father always said the steady hands have to be honest hands too. "Naomi, I have to ask you something, and I need you to think before you answer." I made myself look at her. "Is this real? Or am I just the man who was there on the worst morning of your life? Because I've spent my whole career being the person people cling to in their grief, and then never want to see again once the grief fades, because I remind them. And I would rather lose you now, cleanly, than be the candle you put down the second you're strong enough to carry your own light." My voice cracked. "I can't be your grief, Naomi. I've been everyone's grief my whole life. I don't think I could survive being yours." She was quiet for a long moment. And then she said the bravest, smartest thing. "I've been asking myself the same question," she said, "every day. Whether I only feel this because you held me together when I was falling apart." She turned to face me. "So here's what I think, and I think it's true. The night of our date, before any of this, before Rose, you walked me to my car and waited until my engine started, in the cold, and I drove home annoyed, and do you know what I couldn't stop thinking about? Not your job. That you waited. I'd told you flat out there was no spark, and you still made sure I got home safe, with nothing in it for you." Her eyes filled. "That wasn't grief, Levi. That was before grief. I felt it that night, and I called it not my type, because the truth scared me. The men who were my type never once waited in the cold to see my engine start. They never carried anyone's light but their own." She took my hand. "It's real. I knew it before my grandmother died. I just wasn't brave enough to know it until she did. We took it slow after that, really slow. Slower than either of us wanted. Because we'd both decided we'd rather be certain than fast. We let the grief settle into its proper place. We let the thing between us prove itself across ordinary days, not just the terrible one. And it held. It held through autumn and into winter, and through a whole year of regular life, the unglamorous, unintense, deeply happy kind of life that the men who were her type had never once been able to give her. I remember the night I knew it had truly held. It was an ordinary Tuesday in February. Nothing special. We were on my couch. She was reading. I was going over arrangements for a family I'd be meeting in the morning, and a call came, in the dreaded dinner hour call, the one that had ended things with Claire years before. I tensed before I even answered it. Old habit. Bracing for the look on a woman's face when death interrupts the evening. I took the call, and a family had lost their father, and I told them I'd come. And when I hung up and turned around, ready to apologize, ready for the flicker, Naomi was already up, already holding my coat open for me. "Go," she said simply. "They need you more than I do right now." And then, As I put my arms in the sleeves, she did the thing that undid me completely. She reached up and straightened my collar, and she said, "Drive safe. Be gentle with them. I'll keep the light on here." She kissed me. "Come home when you're done." I stood in my own doorway with my coat on and nearly couldn't speak. Because for my whole adult life, that phone call had been the thing that emptied rooms. And here was a woman handing me my coat and telling me to be gentle with strangers and promising to keep the light on. The exact thing that had made me unlovable to everyone else. She had simply folded into our life like it was the most natural thing in the world. That was the night I stopped being afraid she'd put the candle down. I asked her to marry me on the anniversary of Rose's funeral, in the front room of Bishop Memorial. Beside a candle I'd lit that morning, not for someone in our care this time, but for us. For the start of something, instead of the end. Naomi cried, and laughed, and said yes before I'd finished asking, and then she said, "Rose knew. I swear to you, she knew. She picked this family 11 years ago. She was setting the whole thing up from the grave." Maybe she was. I've stopped being surprised by what love finds a way to arrange. We were married in the spring, in the same church where we buried Rose, because Naomi said grief and joy shouldn't be kept in separate rooms, that the same walls can hold both, and a life that pretends otherwise isn't a whole life. Dean cried during the toast and took full credit for everything. Naomi carried a single white candle down the aisle instead of a bouquet, and we lit our unity candle from it, and that flame is still burning in a lantern on our mantel, fed every day, the way I was raised to. For most of my life I believed I was the man people were grateful for, but never chose. The steady hands, never the heart. I'd made my peace with being the one who keeps the light for everyone else, and is never anybody's light himself. I had it exactly wrong, and it took a woman telling me I wasn't her type to teach me how wrong. Because Naomi was right about one thing at that dinner table: I wasn't her type. The men who were her type were the bright, burning kind, the kind that dazzle you and then leave you in the dark. I'm not that. I never was. I'm the kind who waits in the cold until your engine starts. The kind who keeps a candle lit through the longest nights so you don't have to carry the weight of the light alone. She didn't need her type. She needed someone who'd still be there in the morning. "You're not my type," she told me on our first date. Then her whole world ended at 5 o'clock the next morning, and out of every person she'd ever known, the one she called was me. Not the exciting ones, not her type, the one with the steady hands. It turns out that's not the kind of love that gives you a spark. It's the kind that keeps you warm for the rest of your life.